Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and no one is surprised when the socialist cesspool we call Canada is in massive debt and doesn't know how to spend. Well, actually the problem is they centralize everything, so they know how to spend our money, but when it comes down to it, they don't know how to keep a budget balance. Of course, someone like Justin Trudeau would rather the budget just balance itself. Anyway, so we're going to go into that a bit today, as this news article out of globalnews.ca says. Budget watchdog says Liberals can't account for $2.5 billion in infrastructure funds. And as the article says, the parliamentary budget watchdog says it can't find billions in new infrastructure spending that is supposed to be in key federal spending projections released earlier this month. The main spending estimates for the next 12 months were supposed to include $8 billion in new infrastructure spending, but a report Thursday morning from parliamentary budget officer Jean-Denis Frechette says the documents only show $5.5 billion in infrastructure allocations. The report lists multiple reasons for the missing $2.5 billion, including that the Liberals may defer some intended spending to future years. Another reason cited in the report is that the spending estimates are presented in such a complicated way that Frechette's office couldn't find the money. And I quote, parliamentarians may wish to ask federal officials for a summary of federal infrastructure spending expected to take place in 2017 to 18, and for officials' current expectations of the economic impact due to infrastructure spending compared to the numbers presented in Budget 2016, the report suggests. The report is the latest in a series of studies from the PBO that have raised critical questions about the infrastructure program that is supposed to be a pillar of the government's economic growth strategy. The Liberals have been criticized for failing to produce a concrete plan for the rollout of $186 billion in money set aside for infrastructure investment over the next decade, and this just keeps getting crazier. We've gone into the crazy amount of debt that Canada is in. The fact that household debt had reached $1.8 trillion not that long ago. I mean, Canada has been rated alongside China and Hong Kong as the most likely to suffer a banking crisis, according to the Bank for International Settlements in recent days as well. Obviously, a lot of the reason why they spend so much money a lot of the time is to basically embezzle money, and there's all that kind of shenanigans involved. But John, what do you think of this?
Well, I think the reason why they can't find the actual $2.5 billion is because the budget didn't balance itself. That was the major problem, and of course we know that Trudeau has been multiple times. I think you should put up a video. I just find it hilarious watching that moron saying stuff like that. So I think there's just insane, and on top of that, of course, there's new news that have come out that I wrote about on a Steam article just recently, and it says that the Public Budget Office came out with the numbers showing this year 2018-19 the projected a deficit of $22.1 billion, $4 billion more than the $18.1 billion deficit projected by the government. So again, they're spending way more money than they actually said that they were in the budget. And no surprise, I wrote about this in my book, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? And I should have been adding there, Trudeau, the greatest prime minister of all time, ? It would be probably a follow-up book, because
we admire China's basic dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly. This guy is nothing more than a stand-up comedian that doesn't know that he's a stand-up comedian. I think that's the saddest part. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's just insane how these Liberals are destroying the economy, but this massive spending on everything. They're just trying to find anything and everywhere that they could shuffle out money to anyone that wants a free lunch. And that is the big problem. The government wants to really force upon you to be dependent on them by putting in more regulation and then shoving money into your face. They've been really big proponents of trying to implement a universal basic income. I would say that's when we end up in the state of communism, because it's so easy to look at Finland, for example. They shut down their universal basic income program because they said, it wasn't funded enough. Well, yeah, you're gonna have to raise taxes maybe like 30% on top of what you already have in order to fund it.
And then production is completely cut. I mean, the amount of inflation at the same time, it's just insane. We've got videos on the guaranteed basic income that I definitely suggest people watch, because of course a lot of people support it and don't understand what it does to markets, what it does to a person's ability to actually prosper when they are actually just creating the problem that they strive to solve. Obviously, without as much context in this video, a lot of people won't get that, so I really hope that people check out our videos on that. But I wanted to just mention, John, that I mean, this is just going to lead to them stealing more Canadians' money. They're not going to have enough to pay for something, so they'll steal more money from the populace as if they're not taxing us all to death as it is. And you know, this goes on top of the fact that Bill Morneau, our buddy there that we confronted a few years ago, Bill Morneau recently said that, hey, with the whole pipeline situation, that they'll be covering costs for a lot of it if they have to. And that's just on top of everything else. That, you know, we see so many people on the left all the time calling everything they see fascism. Well, that's fascism. Government control over corporations is fascism. But of course, no one's going to listen to that. There's the full circle of fascism and communism. It's all part of that political paradox where it all comes full circle and clashes with itself. But anyway, I mean, on top of this, we've just got this crippling debt. People are having a really hard time being able to feed their families, and it's gotten to the point where, you know, the point of no return. And as we've gone into Canada's gold reserves in the past, how we've confronted Bill Morneau, the finance minister, about that, and he said, you know, gold doesn't really have any value. You know, it's just there for, you know, it's a facade. It's insane that Canada has more gold than Canada has less gold than Venezuela, and Venezuela is looking at selling off basically everything in the next year just to keep up. But Canada has absolutely no security at all.
Hey, morons, buy some gold. Buy the Venezuelan gold. You know, support your socialist friends over in Venezuela. That'd be great.
Yeah, just don't confiscate it like FDR, please. I want to keep my gold.
Well, this is just another, you know, and then you look at Canada's central bank's balance sheet. That meanwhile you have the gold reserves going this way, you have the central bank's balance sheet going this way because they're buying up all this debt.
We're a country that likes hockey, though, so the hockey stick makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I wonder if it was invented in Canada, the hockey stick chart. And of course, now it's been misused all around the world because people are very envious of this hockey stick. It's very perplexing and very interesting to, you know, show people to scare them to death. Well, the thing is, some people, sometimes you manipulate it. Like, for example, climate change we talked about that in Canada. And I talked about that with, of course, Mr. Lord Christopher Monckton, and we talked about Trudeau and that. You should look up on that. That's actually a really old video now. But yeah, it all comes back to this massive spending by the government. The government is trying to make you dependent on them. And I think we were talking about universal basic income. I think the next step is to first implement a cashless system. Then they have the universal basic income coming in there. And that is, you know, the end all be all of what they really want to do here is they just want to get into so much debt for the government that it's not going to be, well, it's not repayable right now, but then they're going to come out and say, like, oh, yeah, we can't pay it, so we're going to have to create a new system, and then they're going to come out with a little cashless system, maybe to get, and it's probably going to be a part of the special drawing rights, which is what the countries and the big businesses are going to use. We're going to use devalued Canadian dollars that are cashless, that are, you know, in the slave pen, and then, you know, there's no freedom left for you if you let these morons run us into the ground, basically. That's what they're doing. They have no intent of trying to balance the budget or do anything good with their government. They just want to damage and destroy the economy so they could, you know, implement what they want.
Complete dependence, and of course he talks about the SDR, special drawing rights, at the IMF, and obviously they want to pigeonhole people. So, you know, you go, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's, and if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions, legal tender laws, it's never your money, it's always the bank's, and you're basically owned by the banks. And if you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, they're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you in perfect servitude right where they want you, folks. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Canada as they continue to force people into a more dependent public. It's the basically the playbook of every major empire, is to push people into complete dependence under the guise of helping, quote unquote helping, and being a nice neighbor and helping people by stealing people's money and pushing them into debt and pushing them into basically a slave system at the hand of the organized crime cartels we call government and central banks. And John, I mean, there's so much we could go into here. We go into it a million times a week, but what's your bottom line for this report?
Well, the bottom line is the government is a bunch of losers that, you know, try to run the world, and they have no clue what they're doing. They just want to be there because they want control. And the problem is there's nobody there that are ever, you know, picked up a balance sheet or tried to understand it. They have no clue, and they just don't give a F. They don't care about you as an individual. They just care about demolishing Canada as an economy so they could implement. You've seen like Trudeau talking good about dictators, and we can talk about his dad and his connections, you know, with Castro. And
who acted as a bit of a dictator himself, by the way.
Oh yeah, of course. And this is the way the Trudeaus believe. You know, he comes in, he has no background in anything, in business or anything. He just, you know, traveled around the world, little trust fund kid, basically, that came in with all the money being shoved at him from his parents,
and then tries to tell us and lecture us about privilege, which is hilarious.
Yeah, he is actually the one that have what you can call white privilege, and then he tries to talk that and say that everybody else has it. He just like it just baffles me that these morons are talking out there, and if you listen to him, you know, like just that he actually managed to, like, he's probably the worst prime minister in history of the world.
I would just go as far as saying like any mob boss is a bad mob boss, but I mean when you look at the fact that his father was a terrible person but he was smart. And Trudeau is a terrible person and he's an idiot. He's such an idiot. So I mean it's unbelievable. And you know, we got the carbon taxes, income taxes, business taxes, property taxes, capital gains taxes, PST, GST, MST in some places. We got eco taxes, fuel taxes. We got just this massive, I barely went into it, just a massive amount of taxation all at the same time as Canada is driven out of the market as an innovator and a competitor for the sake of stealing people's money for the greater good of the greater number, as G. Edward Griffin puts it so aptly. And it's so incredibly dangerous what's happening to us right now. So that is why we as individuals need to be independent, self-sustainable human beings and break free from the complex of slavery at the hand of the state and look to ourselves rather than the collectivist, you know, group. We need as individuals to look at ourselves, educate ourselves, take action with that education, and be the change we wish to see, rather than depending on, you know, government and banks to be the change, because of course they will obviously take advantage of us and use us to their benefit until they're ready to throw us out into the trash, and then we are screwed. We as individuals need to be financially responsible, because after all, the hallmark of freedom itself is self-responsibility.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of criminals, the banksters, of course. You know, since the 70s, they actually are borrowing, the government are borrowing money directly from the banks. They're not even using their central bank at all. They don't care. But back to, you need to understand how the Canadian economy works and actually be able to protect yourself, because that's the biggest part of this. And in my opinion, I have, you know, of course, written extensively about the Canadian economy in my book, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World. I highly suggest you pick it up and take a look at it and read my opinion on what I think is the outcome of all this and where we're heading down. Like we're starting to, this was before kind of Trudeau actually got in that I started on it. And now we're just seeing that, you know, just rapidly destroying the economy. And I wrote in the book also, you know, you need to protect yourself. And we talk about that so many times there. So yeah, pick up my book and then give me, you know, a shout back and say what you think about it, because I really want people here in Canada to understand fully how the actual economy works and be able to protect themselves, because we're in for some bit of trouble, if you can say it at the least, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Of course, gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, you know, the 5% that are good, just do your own due diligence. It all comes down to that due diligence. And of course, this is our opinion, not, you know, investment advice or anything of the kind, but it's important that all the same, no matter what we say, you don't listen to us. Go and look into this yourself. If if you haven't, because this is incredibly extensive, and it comes down to you understanding it as an individual to be able to evade the storm that's coming and be able to protect yourself and take shelter. So thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find us at steemit.com at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in Steem, the cryptocurrency. And also find us at the Red Pill Expo, which we have a reference link for below in the description and the comments as well. Hosted by G. Edward Griffin, amazing speakers coming out to speak this year. Don't miss it. It's in Spokane, Washington, June 21st to 23rd. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.